Lately, archers have been the hottest trend in Rise of Kingdoms, and I kind of mean that quite literally. They are the hottest troop type. But ever since Emperor Qin came into Rise of Kingdoms, people have been asking me to update my archer guide for 2025. So today we're going to go over the best civilization, city skins, and commander pairs for KVK 1, 2, 3, and beyond, as well as the best equipment and armament upgrade strategy for the future. So stay tuned. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a partner creator with Rise of Kingdoms, which means they support a few videos on the channel every single month, just like this one. But the most important support comes from you guys dropping a thumbs up and also subscribing, because we are so close to 90,000 subscribers, which is actually insane. So thank you guys to everyone who's already subscribed, but double check if you think you are. You might not be. Now, jumping right in here, let's first define what exactly is an archer main in Rise of Kingdoms. Is this a player who only uses archer commanders? And the answer is absolutely not. Okay, an archer main in Rise of Kingdoms simply just means that you use more archer marches than any other troop type on the open field. And why is this? Well, as good as archers are right now with Emperor Qin, and we're going to get into that later in the video, but there's still some exceptionally powerful commanders of other troop types that it's non-negotiable. You have to use some other commanders from other troop types if you want to be competitive in the open field. So strictly speaking, if you're a brand new player and you don't really know what an archer main is, it's just somebody who uses a majority archer armies. So that means if you're running 4 armies in the open field, that means 2 of them are archers. If you're running 5 marches in the open field, then it's either a 2-2-1 lineup or a 3-1-1 lineup with the other troop types, or it could be 2 archers, 1 cav, 1 infantry, 1 range. I don't recommend that, but that is also technically an archer main and a route that you could go. Now let's kick things off by talking about the best civilization for archer players, and the answer is very, very clear here. It is Ottoman Empire. It always has been, it always will be, as long as there's not a better civilization with skill damage and march speed. Because if you look here, not only does Ottoman Empire give you the Janissary, which is a special unit for archers, which means the Janissaries have higher base stats than any other, or well, there's other special units for archers, but the baseline tier 5 and tier 4 units have lower base stats than special units, right? That's true across the board, which means it's also true for the Janissaries. But on top of that, you also get 5% archer health, 5% march speed, which you're going to find out later in the video that archers really need that march speed, and finally 5% skill damage, which is what archers have always been about. So slam dunk Ottoman Empire. If you're an open field player, it is no question this is the best PvP civilization that you can be using. The only other civ that you might switch to is Germany, and this is exclusively for when you are not in KVK. So when you are in the off season, when you're in between battles and you know, in between KVKs, you might switch to Germany, just so that way you get 10% action point recovery and 5% troop training speed. That way, when you actually do land yourself in the Lost Kingdom once again, you'll have been able to kill more barbarians in the off season, you'll have been able to train more units in the off season, and that's really the only thing. So honestly, archer mains are just going to be flip-flopping between Germany and Ottoman Empire, and that's going to remain the case until we see another archer civ come down the pipeline sometime in the future. And honestly, I have no idea when that's going to be, because we did recently get the Mayan civilization, which is technically an archer civ, but it just doesn't stack up to Ottoman Empire. And even before that, we got Egypt not that long ago. I mean, I say that it's been probably like 2 or 3 years at this point, but this is also an archer civ that just does not stack up in the open field. At least obviously this is more rally oriented, so the probability that the next civilization coming into the game is also going to be archers is pretty low. And so Ottoman Empire is like the safest bet, probably for at least another year, if not 2 or more. Next, let's talk about city skins, and this is another one that is really easy for archer players to pick, right? Twilight Falls is a legendary city skin that you get from the KVK shop. This gives you 5% skill damage and 5% commander experience. Who really cares about the experience? What we're really here for is the 5% skill damage. This will outclass almost anything else that you can put in this slot as a free-to-play player. The reason for this is because archers do actually have 2 skins in the combat shop here in KVK, but Flight of the Heron gives you 10% attack and barb damage. The attack it's fine, but you'd rather have the bonus skill damage. It's just a superior stat. And then also there's the top copy Palace. This gives you defense and action point recovery. So there's an argument to be made here about using this in the off season, but right now it's 6 conquest coins. That's really expensive. I don't really think that is the best place you should be spending your conquest coins, and so you land on Twilight Falls. Now, a couple of other things to touch on here for archers is that, you know, if you're a brand new player, obviously you're not going to have that legendary skin right out of the gate. And so what should you do until then? Well, typically you would go for something that has archer health on your city skin. lands. Okay, so No Place Like Home is a good example. Moment of Celebration is another one that gives you 5% archer health. We have Royal Manor, Blooming Court. There's lots of different epic skins like the Easter Party that give you archer health. We have Winter Wonderland as well, right? If you don't have any of the archer health ones, just pick a city skin that gives you 5% of archer stats. It's really pretty self-explanatory, and just use that until you get your hands on Twilight Falls, and you're going to use that pretty much in perpetuity until there's a better one. Now the last thing to touch on here is legendary city skins. Of course, there are Zenith of Power skins. These used to be a sort of 10% bonus, but lately we've been inching up to 15 and 20% in terms of bonus, Poseidon Sanctuary being the most recent, 20% archer attack. If you can get your hands on a city skin like this, a Zenith of Power skin, fantastic, but really the Zenith skin should be saved for the rally leaders, the garrison leaders. Those players are the ones that are really going to need the Zenith skins because their trades matter a lot more than the open field trades. It affects a lot more players simultaneously, right? So, and also it's just really difficult to get a Zenith of Power skin as a free-to-play player or a low spender, and so I wouldn't really like aim for it. But if you are in a low seed kingdom and you have the chance to get one, maybe it's something worth going for, but at the end of the day, it's not really a must have, even though this thing looks absolutely incredible. Look how beautiful this is. It looks so good. Now let's talk about commanders, okay? And we'll start here with the best epic commanders for archers. We're just going to touch on this briefly for the new players. Really, epic commanders are not impactful in the mid to late game at all. Like, you just absolutely never use them. They are just way worse than legendary commanders, and so really KvK1 is the only time that you would even consider using any epic commanders. And typically in KvK1, players are using Sun Tzu, which I know is technically infantry, but he barely cares about infantry. You really can use him with anything, and you would usually use him with Ethelfled, right? That is like the #1 KvK1 pairing. Sun Tzu with Ethelfled, you use pretty much all infantry there and you're good to go. So even if you're an archer main, that's probably what you should be using for KvK1. In second place would be a cavalry army like Belisarius with Baibars, right? Or Minamoto with Baibars if you are spending a little bit in the game. Like, those are like the two main marches that you would use in KvK1. Archers don't really play a role in KvK1 unless you are a whale, a kraken, a player that is a rally leader, right? Then you can start to look at some of the legendary commanders for archers. But okay, I know what you're saying, Omni. I want to use archers in KvK1. Okay, fine, that's fair. If you want to use archers in KvK1 and you're only using epics, then you could use something like Herman with Kusunoki, right? Both these commanders are archer commanders. They're both dealing skill damage. You actually have a really high single target skill damage with Herman here, and a rage reduction and silence for 2 seconds. So very powerful active skill on Herman. Unfortunately, it's only one target, but for an epic commander, really good stuff. You also get some march speed here, which you typically don't get on a lot of archers, especially in the early game. So all in all, Herman is really solid. He also has a rage engine on the 4th skill, right? Kusunoki, on the other hand, is AoE. He has a cleanse. He deals damage over time. It's an additional damage, right? Which is really going to probably be a trend more and more with archers into the future. We'll talk about that later, but he also gives you some extra stats here and more chances to deal damage. That's kind of your best option for archers if we're only using epic commanders. The other thing you could do is, again, use Herman with Sun Tzu. So Herman as primary with the archer tree, then you would use Sun Tzu as the secondary for the AoE and rage engine, and he gives you a 20% bonus to skill damage, and you take 10% less damage across the board, which is just really good stuff. In terms of the talent tree for Herman, it would be something like this, and you're going to see this sort of talent build pretty frequently here throughout. Basically any archer skill commander uses this except for Emperor Qin, which we'll talk about later in the video, but that's going to do it for the epic commander discussion. There's really not much more to say here. Next, let's talk about your first legendary commander investment as an archer main, okay? And ironically, it's still going to be Richard the First. And I know that this is an infantry commander and he's not that exciting, right? And the reason that you would invest in Richard, and just to be very clear, you're only going to get this first skill to 5 and then keep the rest of the skills at 1. And the reason for this is because, one, getting the first skill to 5 is 50 legendary commander sculptures. It's not the end of the world, right? You also need 10 to summon him, and he comes around in the Wheel of Fortune, so it's not the end of the world. It's a very small investment, but the reason that you make this investment pretty much across the board, no matter what type of main you are, despite him being infantry, is because he's pretty good for PvE events, right? He's a little bit less relevant now than he has been before because there's way more commanders in the open field that do healing, that do AoE, and lots of other things, but even still, he's a solid first investment because he comes around so early. He's very tanky, and he has a really strong debuff on the active skill. he really doesn't output any amount of significant damage, and so using him for PvP is pretty much off the table. You're never going to use him for PvP. You're only going to use him for killing barbarians and chaining them out in the world and just staying healthy while you do that. You're also going to use him for things like Sunset Canyon, Lost Canyon, Golden Kingdom, and a ton of other events that really like value having a tanky march. So that's why you're going to invest in Richard. You're going to get value out of him as long as you're grinding barbs and doing what you should be doing every single day during the off season. So make sure you pick him up when you first start playing the game, and that's going to do it. And that's pretty much all that he is good for. Beyond that, the next commander that comes around on the Wheel of Fortune is Seong-Gye, and Seong-Gye he's legendary, not just because he's literally a legendary commander, but he is a legendary in the Rise of Kingdoms community for being one of the best and most valuable investments in the entire game, especially if you invested in him back when the game first came out, because he has been either meta or meta adjacent since the launch of Rise of Kingdoms, which is kind of insane because there's been so much power creep amongst the different commanders in the game that it's kind of insane to think that YSG still can hang with the big boys, even though he's definitely showing his age and has been showing his age for quite a little bit now. But the reason why YSG is such a great investment even in 2025 and going into 2026 is twofold. First of all, he comes around very early in the game, and so you can get your hands on him as a relatively new player in the game, and he also has a very powerful 5-target AoE that turns into a circular AoE when he is expertised with 1700 damage factor. This 5-target circular AoE is way stronger than any other active skill from any commander in the first basically 2 KVKs. Like, he is just so powerful with this active skill. It's kind of insane. He also has a built-in rage engine here where he has a 10% chance to just gain 100 rage, which is going to really help you cast these active skills as much as possible. And then the sort of bread and butter of Seong-Gye is his skill damage bonus, right? The active skill is what deals the damage, and the 4th skill gives him a huge bonus to that skill damage, 50% more skill damage. This is the highest skill damage bonus on a single skill in all of Rise of Kingdoms. So needless to say, when Seong-Gye comes around on the Wheel of Fortune, especially as an archer main, you want to max Seong-Gye if you can, right? I know that it's going to take a lot of grinding, it's going to take a lot of gems, and really you should be saving a decent amount of your gems for the Wheel of Fortune for Seong-Gye, because that expertise really does make a difference, right? Turning it from a fan shape to a circle just maximizes the chances that you actually hit 5 targets, because they could be behind you and you're still going to be hitting them with this really strong damage factor. The second reason why Seong-Gye is such a valuable investment in the early game is because the infamous commander swap event that comes around at the end of your 2nd KVK. What this event effectively does is it makes any investment that you've made into early game commanders transferable to a very strong end game commander immediately, right? Now there's a lot that goes into this event, and I've made entire dedicated guides for this event because it is so important for the progression of your account. So if you want more information about the commander swap event, check out the dedicated guides on my channel for this specific event. Again, I can't understate it enough. It only comes around for your account once and then it's gone forever, so you want to get the most value out of it, and that does mean saving some gems and doing the right things here, okay? But the reason that you can, go all in on Seong-Gye these days is because, first of all, he's super powerful in his own right, and second of all, when you get to this commander swap event, you could effectively take all of that progress, all of that expertise, 6 stars, max level, you could take all that progress and just immediately convert it into progress on a commander that is much more powerful. And a little bit of a hint here, the answer is Emperor Qin. Okay, Qin Shi Huang is the commander you must be getting from the commander swap event as an archer main, and honestly at this point really as any troop type main. Like, he's just the best commander in the game. So when this event comes around, you're going to swap your expertise YSG for an Emperor Qin, and you will be golden going into your season of conquest, and really season 3. Now the commander swap event does actually allow you to do 2 swaps, and so besides Emperor Qin, who else should you do? The answer is probably either King Arthur or Bai Chi. I think King Arthur might be a little bit better than Bai Chi, even though I think infantry are in a better place, like all things considered. So honestly, I could see the Bai Chi being just just as good here as well. It really comes down to which army you want to build second, right? First you're going to build an archer march, then are you going to build an infantry march? If so, go by Chi. If you're going to build a cavalry march, then go King Arthur. It's pretty self-explanatory. You could also consider getting Philip, and his advantage is that he is universal. He's a leadership commander, and so you could use him as a secondary to pretty much anybody, honestly. However, Philip is already starting to rub me the wrong way, which is kind of unfortunate because I do know that there's a lot of people love Philip, a lot of people invested in Philip. The problem with Philip is honestly that right after he came out, we got King Arthur, Bai Chi, and Emperor Qin, and the level of power creep with those commanders, especially Emperor Qin, is through the roof. And so when you think about the amount of damage output by every other march in the field, and then you look at Philip, who has no damage on the active skill, and he has a decent instant proc for sure. He's a supportive commander, like that's really what he's for. He amplifies the damage of your primary with the all damage here, but like this is not enough to compensate for the fact that he himself is not dealing damage when his active skill goes off, right? In the instant proc meta, which was kind of near the end of last year, Philip was an all-star, right? And there's still a lot to be said about instant proc for sure. I'm not saying it's dead, but it is definitely less valuable than it was 6 to 12 months ago. So just understand that if you're gonna get Philip from the commander swap event, you're doing so more for convenience and flexibility rather than the strongest march in the game. It's not going to be with Philip. With all that being said, let's talk about your first real legendary investment pair in Rise of Kingdoms for an archer main. And there's a couple of ways that you can go about this. Okay, now we already talked about swapping your YSG for Emperor Qin, and that just immediately gets you an expertise to Emperor Qin, which is like the best commander in the game, and so you're starting off on a strong foot. The other route that you could go, however, would be to swap a non-expertise commander, like let's say a gold key commander that you've just gotten a bunch of sculptures from, swapping them with your Emperor Qin, so that way you have some investment in Qin and keeping your expertise YSG, and then finishing off Emperor Qin with all of your sculptures and getting him to max level and all that other stuff. Okay, that is one route you can go, but let's assume that you swapped your YSG, right? Like let's just say that now you have an expertise to Emperor Qin. What should you do from there? Who should you pair him with? Okay, well, if you got Philip from the commander swap event, you just throw him there. The synergy here isn't, I mean, it's nothing crazy, right? It just so happens to be the fact that he's a universal secondary and you can get him from the commander swap event without any other prerequisites, and so you could do this until you have something better. I think that that is completely fair, but really your primary focus when you get into KVK3 is to get your hands on Zhuge Liang. This is the best pairing for Emperor Qin. It is insane the amount of damage output that you have between these two commanders, and the downside here is that I'm pretty sure the Archer Wheel of Fortune comes around near the end of KVK3, so you might be in a bit of an awkward spot, especially if you swapped away your YSG. But this is the first pairing that you want to get as a archer main in the game because it's just busted. It is just the best. This is arguably the best commander pairing in the entire game right now. It's kind of hard to argue against that, honestly, because Emperor Qin is just so powerful. He pops his active skill at faster than pretty much anybody else in the game, which means your secondary pops their active skill faster than anyone in the game, and also the expertise on Zhuge Liang ensures that you're getting a lot of extra rage to feed the rage consumption of Emperor Qin, and it's just this constant, you're just constantly pumping out damage, and it is truly busted. Like, this is easily one of the best, if not the best commander pairs in the entire game right now, and I can't see that really changing for quite a while. Like, Emperor Qin was just such a cut above everybody else that like this is a slam dunk, no question. So from here, okay, whether you got the Zhuge Liang or somehow you just swapped something else for Emperor Qin and you kept your YSG from the swap event, you know, you're using one of these two commander pairings, right? That's pretty much it. When it comes to your talent builds for Emperor Qin, because remember I did say earlier that he's kind of the only exception to that talent build I showed you for Herman as an epic. When it comes to talent builds for Emperor Qin, this is what I was using in my current KVK, and like I said earlier when we were talking about epic Herman, he's like the only archer commander that kind of breaks the mold when it comes to the best talent build for archer skill commanders. But basically what you could see here is we actually don't grab feral nature because you don't really need it, especially when you're pairing him with Zhuge Liang, and this is the talent build that I used in my current KVK. It was fantastic. I had no problems. I put 1 point into Razor Sharp kind of as like a little insurance policy. There are a lot of commanders in the game right now in the open field that do remove rage from you, so I put that there. If you find that you don't need that, you can do something like this as well. You just get some extra attack to deal more damage if you want. I personally don't love naked rage because you're taking so much skill damage from everybody else, so it's like, yeah, you are amplifying your own damage, but there is definitely a cost to that, whereas if you go full quiver, you just get slightly more damage and there's really no downside, right? So that's pretty much it. This is probably the talent build that I would point you towards in my opinion, but for me, like I said, I used this and I didn't have any problems at all. You still generate insane reports here. Now another quick note here, if you are doing the Emperor Qin with YSG, his RNG for the rage gain here is a little bit less reliable than the rage gain on the expertise of Zhuge Liang. So with that being said, you might want to go a little bit more into something like Razor Sharp here, just to kind of compensate for the fact that you're going to have a less reliable rage engine with YSG. And on the topic of YSG, this is pretty much one of the last things, like little details of YSG you want to cover here, is that as you progress later into the game, you're going to unlock the museum. Okay, and the museum serves the purpose of boosting or enhancing older commanders to make them a little bit stronger and bring them up to, or at least closer to, the meta of the current meta in the end game, right? And honestly, the system could use a lot of work. It's not great, but I will say that Seong-Gye is probably the single best relic in the entire museum. It is just insane how much stats he gets here. 12% more skill damage and 20% archer defense. This works really well with Emperor Qin, because Emperor Qin already is a bit tanky. You get more of that, and again, skill damage on skill damage on skill damage. That is the name of the game for archers. And so as soon as you can, you basically can max this out for Seong-Gye and just have a total of 62% skill damage on his kit, which is truly insane. So that's going to do it for your first investment. You either have this, in which case from there you're going to work on Zhuge Liang because he is better, or you started working on Zhuge Liang as soon as you could, and this is the first pairing that you get. From there, what is the next commander pair that you're going to be working on here? And honestly, you can choose, like I said earlier, between infantry and cavalry, right? And I think by the end of this year we should be seeing a new cavalry launch, and so I don't really know exactly like what that's going to look like. Hopefully it's a really strong combo commander, but because I don't want to just speculate here and say that it's going to be really strong, I'm going to point you in the direction of making your second army an infantry army. And what that looks like is Bai Qi with Liu Che. This is easily the best infantry march in the game right now. Both of them are 5 target AoE. Both of them have decent stats. They both have march speed. They both deal crazy smite damage with bonuses to smite damage, and the sort of sprinkles on top is that the expertise on Liu Che has combo damage as well, and every time it pops it gives you extra rage there, and so the rage cycle here is crazy as well. Both of these, like, these are probably the two, not probably, these are currently at the time of recording this, the two best armies in the open field in Rise of Kingdoms right now. From here you branch out to your third army, and the question is, do you do a second archer march or do you branch out into cavalry? And honestly, I would point you towards a cavalry march. And I know that you're getting a little bit frustrated because you're like, Omniarch, this is an archer guide, where are all the archers, right? And we're going to get into that, okay? But I do still think that it is very important to have a more well-rounded account before kind of niching down and diving deeper into one troop type, right? Like, you want the best of each troop type, and then you niche down and you go a little bit deeper into archers. Okay, so if you want, you can build your second archer march at this point, and you can kind of skip cavalry for now. If you want to do that, just move on to the next march. We'll talk about that in a second, but I'm going to point you towards cavalry, and the reason why is because King Arthur himself is extremely powerful in Rise of Kingdoms. He is easily, hands down, the best cavalry commander in the game right now. The only downside is that at the time of recording this, we don't have a super strong combo cav commander to pair him with, right? He's kind of just stuck using either Philip or using some older cavalry commanders that we're kind of just using to make do. So some examples of that would be commanders such as William, right? And also commanders such as Joan of Arc Prime. These are two great secondaries that you can use behind your King Arthur, and this would be like the single best march that you could do for King Arthur right now. I think down the line we are going to get another cav commander that does combo damage, and most likely we're going to see that commander slapped behind King Arthur, but until then you're going to be stuck using one of these, and I think Philip is obviously the safest investment right now of these three because he's universal. So you could just, when you're done with him for calves, you could slap him somewhere for archers and vice versa, and so that's going to be the way that you do that. And so that's the direction that I'm going to point you in for cavalry as your first cav march. Now it's also worth noting that, like I said earlier, if the two commanders that you got from the swap event were Emperor Qin and Philip, then you actually might consider doing cavalry before infantry, strictly because you'll already have Philip here, and so it's kind of just a slam dunk. You just get your King Arthur and you're good to go. With infantry you have to expertise 2 commanders, whereas if you got the Philip from the commander swap, then all you need is 1 commander to complete that, and then boom, there you go. Now you've got 2 marches here, and it's a little bit easier to get those 2 than to go and grab the infantry, even though infantry is technically, in my opinion, a much stronger march than the Arthur Philip. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's kind of how I'm looking at this. So you really could go either way there, and that's my recommendation for building your cavalry out of the gate. Now let's start to get into some of the interesting ways that you could branch out of your single archer march and start to talk about the second archer march that we're going to be looking at here in the video. Okay, so let's move these down so we know we're talking mainly about archers now. And for your second archer march, I have 2 recommendations for you. Okay, first of all, ironically, Seong-Gye is in the second march for most players, and that's what makes this a little bit frustrating, right? Because if you swap out your YSG for Emperor Qin, that is obviously like a superior commander, right? Emperor Qin is clearly superior to YSG, so it is clearly the play to swap one for the other. But it's a little bit weird that like you're then going to go back and eventually invest in YSG again to kind of fill out your second pair, right? Now you don't have to, and we'll talk about why in a second, but if you're running 2 commander pairs, then YSG is probably going to be there. Okay, and if that's the case, you're probably going to run him behind a Hermann Prime. I think Hermann Prime YSG is a great march. YSG of course has no march speed, and so Hermann Prime kind of helps him there. Same thing with Zhuge Liang, he has no march speed, and so that's why you kind of have your Emperor Qin here to help him out as well. And I think this is a really solid 2 commander lineup for your archers. Now the other thing that you could do would be something like this, and this I think is actually arguably an even better, more well-rounded approach to 2 archers, except there's a good chance that if you have 2 sets of gear, 2 sets of armaments, all that stuff, and one set of that gear and armaments is just far superior than the other set, then you kind of want to min-max it and do something like this, right, where you have your worst stuff on your worst army, because then, you know, if you're going to bench one of them, you just bench that one and you get the maximum value from this single march. But if you have pretty comparable sets of gear, pretty comparable sets of armaments, and it doesn't really matter much, then you could do something like this, and I think that you will be just happy with that. Now the reason that I said you don't necessarily need YSG for a 2 army lineup is because you could easily do something like this, right? We could do this, and right out of the gate you've got really 2 really strong archer marches. The benefit of this over the YSG is that the Ashurbanipal actually has some march speed outside of territory, right? And so you actually just have a faster archer march, and there's a lot of benefits to that. The downside is that Ashurbanipal deals less damage than YSG in terms of just raw damage output. He doesn't have that 50, or I should say 62% skill damage bonus. He doesn't have a 5 target circular AoE. It's a 5 target half circle shape, and it's 1500 damage factor as opposed to the 1700 on YSG. Now you do deal an extra 1000 to the target you're hitting, so that kind of makes up for it a little bit. But all in all, I don't love Ashurbanipal in the open field. I think that people mainly use him because he's 5 target and has march speed, and that's kind of like just what you need for archers, and there's just no better alternative right now. So there's that. But I will also say the downside of Ashurbanipal is that he is a mightiest governor commander, and so that's kind of why it's like it's just easier for most players to get their hands on YSG. And so whether you want to run it something like this or something like this, those I would say are your 2 best archer pairs or archer marches in the open field, unless you can get Ashurbanipal and prefer that march speed. Then we're talking about maybe benching the YSG. From there, let's talk about your third archer march, and this is definitely going to involve pairing your Emperor Qin with your YSG, and from there you're going to be splitting up your Zhuge Liang with your Hermann Prime. And from here what we're going to do is we actually got to move some things around. Okay, you're going to be slapping your Ashurbanipal in front of your Hermann Prime just like you did before, and then you're really going to need your Philip here behind your Zhuge Liang, right? In which case then you need to move your either William or Joan of Arc behind your King Arthur until there's a better pairing for King Arthur, right? Like that's just really how it's going to go. Eventually the next combo cav is going to go here, and that's going to fill this out really nicely. But until then it's all speculation, and so we're going to be doing something like this. I do want to say, however, this video is focused a bit more towards free-to-play players, and fielding 5 marches as a free-to-play player is first of all going to take a really long time to get there. Second of all, it's really expensive if you're running all tier 5s. Like you need a lot of farm accounts, you need a lot of grinding. It's really hard to field 5 all legendary armies, and on top of that getting good enough gear, good enough armaments. Like it's really a challenge, right? So honestly, if I'm being honest with you guys, what I would recommend you do is just leaving something like this. And for a while what you could do is use that 5th march to reinforce rallies, reinforce garrisons, march off and grab a rune somewhere on the map. There's a lot of things you can do with that 5th army slot that don't necessarily have to be open field combat, right? And truthfully, for free-to-play players, like, you have to save sculptures for so long before you can make investments, and you really can't afford to mess up a commander investment, right? And so the strategy for free-to-play players is you need to save basically 1400 legendary commander sculptures before pulling the trigger on anything, right? And I know that that's like insane, because that is probably a year's worth of saving for a free-to-play player, unless you're really grinding. Maybe it's 9 months or something like that, right? But like, you really, I can't understate this enough, it's so it takes so long to get a pair of commanders for a free-to-play player, that like, you don't want to be drip feeding these sculptures into a commander, right? Like, if you're just like drip feeding these sculptures into Emperor Qin, by the time you expertise him, like, then what? Then there might be a new archer in the game that's even better, right? You know, so really what you want to do is, and you know, Emperor Qin I think is a little bit of an exception because he is just so strong, but like, you don't want to be drip feeding sculptures into Bai Chi right now. Like, that's a horrible strategy, because you know, by the time you're done with him, there could be a new smite commander that's just better for infantry, and then that's it, right? So just keep that in mind. Don't rush to flush out 5 marches, because you might not have the gear, you might not have the armaments, you might not have the resource economy to really do that, and also you might be investing in a commander that's going to be outdated by the time you're done with him, right? So just keep that in mind. There's no shame in just running 4 marches as a free to play for a while, until you like really can get ahead of the curve and really make sure that you're making the best possible investments that you can. Okay, and if you're running 4, this is what I'm going to be recommending to you guys. Next, let's talk about equipment progression for archer players, especially as a free-to-play player. Let's talk about this. Okay, the first thing that you want to aim for when you're building your equipment is the 4-piece revival set. Okay, and I know that this is kind of like, it's a rough first step to consider, because as a new player, you're looking at this purple gear and you're saying, wow, this is so hard to get, it's so rare, it's so many materials. Omniarch, how could I possibly ever get that, right? And I promise you, as you play more and more and do more events and collect those blueprints, you are going to find that getting, like, at a certain point, right, like, you're going to have so many extra blueprints that you won't even know what to do with them, right? If I look at my equipment here, like, I have 191 of these, 460 of these, right? Like, you have so many of them that it's kind of ridiculous. Okay, so I know this is like a bit of a shock to be looking directly at purple gear, but this is kind of your stretch goal. This is like where you want to aim for, is the 4-piece revival set, and you're going to pair that with the flame treads, because that gives you some archer health. And your first, you know, sort of starter piece of equipment is going to be Staff of the Lost. Okay, this is the only blue piece that we're talking about here, because archers, as far as I can tell, do not have a green or a gray piece that gives them stats, so you're kind of stuck with Staff of the Lost. After Staff of the Lost, obviously you're going to go towards the Golden Age. This is just going to give you even more defense for your archers. Don't ask me why a golden sword is the archer weapon. Doesn't make any sense to me either. I think they did it just for game balancing purposes. I really have no idea what's going on there, but either way, this is the all sort of purple set if you wanted to go ahead and do that. And you're going to get a really nice amount of stats from that. So you're going to have, once all of this is talented, you're going to have 19% attack, 40% archer defense, and 7.5% archer health. From here, what you want to do is replace the chest piece with the Dragon's Breath chest piece, and replace the gloves with the Dragon's Breath vambraces. Now, recently, since KVK Crystal Tech has been changed, it kind of tweaks the strategy that you should take with your archer gear, and by that I mean it actually makes it a little bit less important to diversify and sort of min-max your archer set, right? Because previously the best strategy for archer gear was a 2-2-2 setup, where you would do 2 KVK pieces, 2 Dragon's Breath pieces, and then 2 leadership pieces. Now with the new KVK tech that gives you even more health, it's less important to get health on your archer equipment pieces, on top of the fact that if you're only running Emperor Qin with Zhuge Liang, you've got 50% archer health there as well, which is already insane. So you're already getting a ton of health from the commanders, and now you're getting 15% health from Crystal Tech as well. It just makes it less and less important to get the 2 leadership pieces for your archers, right? But back in the day, I did a massive video testing all of this, and there was only about, you know, I think there was like 4 or 6 different sort of relevant sets of gear for archers, and of all the different sets, the biggest discrepancy was like maybe a 6% difference in your trade, right? And that's like the biggest one. Most sets were within maybe 2% of one another when it comes to a trade average. So I don't want you guys to like really overthink this too much. Yes, you could probably squeeze out an extra 1% here or there if you go one way or another. But the reason that I'm telling you all this is because it really is going to depend on how you want to build your gear here, right? From here, from this 2-piece set, really you would start building your 2 kvk pieces, right? So you have the ancestral mask of night as your kvk helmet, and then you have of course the Hydra's blast as your kvk weapon, and those would be the next 2 pieces that I would go for here if you are building your legendary set. Okay, that's going to bring you up to 32.5% attack and 42.5% defense and 22% health. Realistically, by the way, these are not going to be special talented because it's really expensive. So really you're looking at 25.5% attack, 35% defense, and 18.5% health. Okay, from here, well, you've already lost your set bonuses from your revival set. Okay, so you might as well replace those legs and the boots, and you've got 2 routes that you can go. And previously, like I said, the best in slot choice would be to go for something like the leadership legs and the leadership boots, and that's because these give you troop health. And I think that this is still a very strong option and is contender for best in slot for archers. However, at this point it might just be safe to go for the 2+4 set where you get 2 kvk pieces and 4 of the Dragon's Breath set. And why do I say this? Well, first of all, like I said, the differences between the sets were already so minor to begin with, and now that you have more health from Emperor Qin and kvk, it's less important to go like min-max and go on the leadership route. And on top of that, there's a 4-piece set bonus here for the Dragon's Breath, which gives you 3% more skill damage. And so like we said throughout this entire video, skill damage is the name of the game when it comes to archers. And so if you don't want to go the leadership route, I think right now it is totally safe to go ahead and just grab the 4-piece Dragon's Breath set. Yes, you get attack on the legs. It is what it is. You've already got a ton of health and defense from other places. And also, like, let's not pretend like attack isn't valuable on Emperor Qin as well, because he is pumping out damage. And if we look at Emperor Qin, he has no attack on his kit, and you mainly have health on Zhuge Liang. There's a chance of attack as well, but my point is, like, having a little extra attack here for archers really doesn't hurt as much as you might think, especially given the new landscape that we find ourselves in with Crystal Tech, with Emperor Qin's stat distribution and all that other stuff. So all in all, I think this is a really fair place to work towards for your first ever archer set, and it's going to take a really long time to get here, but I think you're really going to like this. It's a 4-2 setup here, and if we're going to start to be talking about iconic upgrades, I would say the first thing that you want to do is work on iconic 4 boots. This is going to give you the march speed that you really need. I prioritized my iconic 5 boots, honestly, but iconic 5 is really expensive, right? And it's also conditional, so at least iconic 4 I would say is really, really important for archers. Beyond that, what you want to do is just get iconic tier 2 for everything as an open field player, right? Like that's really what it comes down to. Obviously, if you're still focusing on like doing like iconic crystals, right? Iconic crystals should be focused on your legs and boots first because they give you base health, and then from there you can work on the other pieces. But iconic 2 for the weapon is extremely good here. Iconic 2 for the helmet is also really good. You get an extra 1.5% health, and then from there you get iconic 2 on the chest piece, that is ignoring enemy defense. Iconic 2 on the legs is actually interesting because you ignore their health, which is also really good. And then iconic 2 on the gloves, not that important, but it's ignoring enemy attack, right? So the reason that you go for iconic 2 on everything is because after that there's diminishing returns. Like let's look at it for just for example, this is my cav gear, right? We're talking about 15 legendary materials for 300 troops. Buddy, I lose 300 troops in a quarter of a second. Like that is iconic 3 is almost nothing, right? Like you barely get anything out of iconic 3 at all for any of the pieces. All the pieces give you bonus troops, and you know it's important to remember that like more troops equals more damage, yes, but again, 15 legendary materials and a legendary blueprint just to bring 300 more troops to the battlefield. It's not nothing, but it's merely a stepping stone to the better things in the kit, right? So again, I really think that iconic, if we're talking about min-maxing the value, iconic 2 is like really where you get a lot of value for only a little bit of an investment. Like for example, going to iconic 2 on my boots here for cavalry, it's 10 legendary materials, right? And so that's 33% fewer investment than going from 2 to 3, but it gives me a percent of attack, which is like, yeah, that's also a very small bonus here, but it's cheaper and it's probably about as impactful as 300 units, to be honest with you. So that's why I think iconic 2 is the best bang for your buck for open field, and then eventually you're going to make your way towards iconic 3 and 4 and beyond for other things. The first piece that I think you should get iconic 5 for archers obviously is the boots, right? I mean, the march speed here is just so important with Zhuge Liang not having march speed, right? And with YSG not having march speed, iconic 5 boots is where you want to go. Okay, if we're talking about accessories, the two accessories that you should be using before you get legendaries would be the ancient stratagems for that troop capacity. This is, keep in mind, a percentage based rather than a flat 300, so that's why this is really good. And then also silent trial is fantastic, right? Reducing enemy rage is really powerful. No matter who you're hitting, silent trial is really good. From there, you know, if you don't have one of these, you could always use the call of the loyal. This is going to give you some extra march speed, and it's a blue piece, which is fantastic. But when we move on to legendary accessories, I would say for archers, especially for Emperor Qin, you would do something like Ring of Doom, and then for the second piece you could either do Pendant of Eternal Night, the Horn of Fury, or you could go towards something a little bit more unconventional like the Korok's War Drums. Technically best in slot is Pendant of Eternal Night, but this is a really niche item that I typically don't recommend players invest in, because remember, accessories, the beauty of accessories is that you can move them from one army to another, right? And really right now at the time of recording this, no other commander benefits really from Pendant of Eternal Night. I mean, they do, but it's like such a small benefit. You'd rather have Horn of Fury, right? So the benefit of the horn over the Pendant of Eternal Night is that it's more transferable between armies, whereas the Pendant of Eternal Night is really just for Emperor Qin at this point, right? And also I did find in my, just for my personal testing in my most recent KVK, the Horn of Fury is not needed on Emperor Qin, but sometimes it does move the needle, right? Sometimes I noticed that when I ran the Ring and Horn, I would cast my active skill maybe a turn sooner than I would without it, right? On paper it looks like the Horn of Fury is completely useless, but that doesn't take into account the fact that you're going in and out of combat, you're losing rage sometimes if your rage bar falls off. Yes, that might be a skill issue, but sometimes you just, there's no choice but to retreat a little bit, so it is what it is. So yeah, Horn of Fury is not like really the best thing ever on Emperor Qin, but you know, it's a big investment. It's 120 legendary materials, and if I'm gonna drop that much on an accessory, I want it to be something that is versatile throughout the different commander metas as they shift around, right? So that's why I like Horn of Fury and the Ring of Doom personally. Keep that in mind. And then again, of course, we're talking about your second march. Your second march for archers is definitely going to be running Horn of Fury and Ring of Doom, right? So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. The last thing I want to touch on here is your formation and sort of what formations you should be prioritizing for archers, and the answer is obviously wedge formation. This is sort of the name of the game, like we've said throughout the entirety of this video. Wedge formation is skill damage, and that is what archers want the most of forever. Okay, obviously going for things like Hunter in the KVK shop is going to really move the needle for you as an archer player. Slap this on your Emperor Qin with Zhuge Liang and you are popping off. I made a video recently talking about and actually testing boosts versus bonuses in Rise of Kingdoms. They are different. Okay, so check out that video. I know a lot of you actually missed that video, so check that out if you want to know the difference and why Hunter is just so much better than it actually looks. Also, when you come into the courier station, you go into the shop here and you come to superior. When you do finally get 8 of these shards, you can come in and you can exchange it for balance. This is going to give you a 3.5% resistance to normal damage, which is really good, and you have 8% more skill damage for the next 3 seconds. And then when it comes to your wish list here, I personally would go for Honors of the Pantheon. This is a flat 10% boost to skill damage dealt, and this is also in the hardest to obtain slot for your armaments here. Like, getting good stats here is really hard, and so getting like the best in slot special inscription is really going to help you out a lot here. So that's kind of why I go for the medal when it comes to the wish list here. When it comes to dispatches, obviously your preferred formations are going to be the wedge formation, and then when we're building your infantry and your calves, you're going to want to do pincer and you're going to want to do combo. I only have arch here because I still have to finish my wish list for that before I move on, and then obviously I'll go back to wedge. But that's pretty much it. The final thing I want to touch on when it comes to armaments is that the devs have revealed that we will be getting a new skill damage formation at some point in the future. It could be as early as December of 2025, in which case if it's stronger than wedge formation, then you're going to start to use your conversion stones that you get from KVK achievements, and also from your actual just achievements for your account. You'll use these to transfer or convert your armaments over to whatever that new one is, and that's how you're going to go ahead and do that. So that's kind of going to do it for the archer guide here in Rise of Kingdoms. If you guys made it all the way to the end of this video, definitely drop a thumbs up down below, and in the comments put 3 of the bow and arrow emoji if there is one. I'm sure there is one. There's emojis for everything. Put a bow and arrow emoji in the comment section below so I know you made it all the way to the end of this video, and also comment down below your thoughts on everything we touched on here. What do you think about the current state of archers in Rise of Kingdoms in 2025? Let me know down there, and while you're down there, drop a thumbs up on the video. It really helps out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it, and consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.